has declared it will stop censoring web searches in China, a move that may lead to closing up shop in the country. But what are the perils of picking a fight with China? Has the internet giant bitten off more than it can chew? Nicholas Consonery is with us now. He is a China specialist at the Eurasia Group. His firm counsels corporations about the political risks of doing business in the region. Now he is joining us from our D.C. bureau. Nicholas, so glad you could join us this morning. You and I were talking right before we came to air, and you said what's interesting is to look at this from the Chinese perspective. We've been talking a lot about it from Google's perspective, the fact that revenue-wise, they're not going to lose a whole lot of money if they pull out of China. And maybe China wants that, right? To have Baidu, for example, gain market share. That's not such a bad thing from the Chinese perspective. Is that right?
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for having me. I think that's right. I think Beijing right now is looking at their policies surrounding the ability to control access to information. And I think if you look at what Beijing has done over the course of the past year, the trajectory is very clear. I mean, they're really trying to aggressively ramp up and accelerate their ability to control information.
You've seen as Google is trying to become more open.
Exactly, yeah. So you have this, Google and the Chinese government's own policies, I think, are running exactly contradictory in this instance. And I think this really is not going to end well for Google as a result of that.
You think it's not going to end well for Google, but yet you acknowledge as well, as far as revenue goes, it really doesn't matter that much to their bottom line. So what's bad about this for Google?
Right. This is in reference to their presence in China. I think again, the course is exactly contradictory here. I mean, it's very clear that, and if you look at Beijing's response last night, two different Chinese government bodies came out and said, look, we're not willing to scale back our control over filtered search engines in China. So it seems like Google's initial request to run an unfiltered search engine is probably not going to get regulatory approval there.
How much does China have to worry about its youth? I mean, it's a huge part of their population, and the fact that they may feel isolated, maybe they don't know the reasons, but how much does the government have to be concerned about isolating that group?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, because you look at the netizen community, the online community in China. It's very clear. I mean, that's becoming an increasingly vocal community, and policymaking is becoming increasingly susceptible to criticisms from that community. And so what you're already starting to see is an online backlash to what is perceived as Google coming in and saying we want to do uncensored search, and the Chinese government stopping them from doing that.
Do you think the average person, though, actually knows the details?
I think the average urban youth in China, in China's major cities, who's able to access the internet and get around the Great Firewall, that constituency, I do think they know the details.
Well, that brings up an interesting point, because even technologically, there are many whiz kids out there, right, who can get around firewalls, something that would be hard for me, easy for them.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And you've got a lot of other internet sites like Facebook and Twitter that are already blocked in China anyways, and still, you have a pretty significant amount of Chinese users. I mean, it's lower than it would be if they had, unrestricted access, but they still do get on it.
Now, it doesn't seem like the Chinese government seems particularly fearful of annoying a big U.S. company. Is that your take on it?
No, I think that's right. I mean, and this is playing out in a lot of different industries in a lot of different ways. I mean, the government is accelerating a push to foster the growth of domestic firms. They want Chinese companies to be more competitive globally, and we're seeing that play out with indigenous innovation policies, with information access and control policies, and it's playing out across the board.
So, Nicholas, in a word, they're not really concerned about China looking unbusiness friendly.
No, I think they're much more concerned about the domestic market and the strength of the domestic Chinese companies. I think those are #1 priorities right now.
Nicholas, thank you very much. Nicholas Consonery.